Welcome back to Trying to Figure This Out. If this is your first time listening, I'm really glad you're here. And if you've been with me since the beginning, welcome back. I appreciate you spending a little time with me today. I've been thinking about something. Actually, I've been wrestling with this for a while now. I want to challenge an idea today, not because I think I'm right and everyone else is wrong, but because I've been asking myself a question that I honestly wish I had asked a long time ago. What if one of the biggest lies our generation was ever sold wasn't really a lie at all? What if it was simply a belief passed down by people who loved us, people who wanted the very best for us, people who shared what had worked in their own lives? They told us, work hard, be loyal, keep your head down, do the right thing, take care of your family, stay with the company. If you do these things, everything will work out. You know what? Those weren't bad lessons. In fact, they helped build the life I'm living today. For a long time, I believed that. And honestly, a big part of me still does. I still believe in hard work. I still believe in integrity. I still believe your word should mean something. So, this isn't an episode about blaming our parents, our teachers, or even our coaches, or the people who came before us. This is about something much bigger. It's about asking whether we're still living by the rules that were written for a different world. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped asking, is this helping me become the person I'm trying to become? And started asking, am I being loyal? Loyal to my employer, loyal to expectations, loyal to the version of myself everyone had come to know. Then one day, a question hit me that I couldn't shake. What if the person I needed to be loyal to was the person I was still becoming? I want you to sit with that for a second because I have. And if I'm being honest, the question made me uncomfortable. There were seasons of my life where I confused loyalty with obligation. I confused staying with growing, sacrifice with success. Maybe you've done that too. Maybe you stayed in a job because leaving it felt like quitting. Maybe you've held on to a relationship long after it ran its course. Or maybe you stayed loyal to a dream that no longer belonged to you. Or maybe, just maybe, you stayed loyal to a version of yourself that you've already outgrown. I don't know. I'm not here to tell you what the answer should be. I'm still trying to figure that out myself. But I do know this: the older I get, the more I realize that some of the beliefs that built our lives deserve another look. Not because they were wrong, but because we are different. And maybe, just maybe, the biggest lie we were ever sold wasn't loyalty. Maybe it was believing we should never question it. I've been sitting with that thought for a while now. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't learn loyalty from a book. I learned it by watching. Some of the most important lessons in our lives were never actually taught to us, they were observed. Nobody sat me down and explained what loyalty was. There wasn't a conversation where my mom said, "Look, son, let me tell you what loyalty looks like." It did not happen that way. I learned it by watching, and I think that's how most of us learn. We watched our parents, our grandparents, our coaches, our teachers, the people we admired. We watched how they treated people. We watched whether they kept their promises. We watched how they handled disappointment. And we watched whether they showed up when life got hard. Looking back now, I don't remember every conversation my mother and I had, but I remember her character. I remember that when she gave someone her word, she meant it. When she made a commitment, she honored it. There was a consistency about the way she lived, and that stayed with me. What's interesting, as a kid, we don't realize we're collecting beliefs. We think we're just growing up. We don't question what we're seeing. Why would we? The people we're learning from are the people we trust the most. And here's something that I've been wondering though. Have you ever stopped to think about where your beliefs came from? Not whether they were right or wrong, just where did they come from? Because I had not. For most of my life, I simply accepted them. Have you ever said a little saying and think, damn, my mom or so and so used to say that all the time? So little by little, those beliefs became part of who we are. Looking back, I don't think my mom was trying to teach me about loyalty. She was simply living her life. I just happened to be paying attention. By the time I entered the workforce, I knew what hard work looked like. I already had a picture of someone who worked hard, someone people could count on, someone who kept their word. Of course, someone who honored their commitments. Those weren't lessons about being a man. They were lessons about character, and they served me well. If I could go back, I wouldn't throw those lessons away, not for a second. But here's something I never considered. Every strength had a shadow. Hard work can become working so much that you forget why you started. Commitment can quietly become obligations. Responsibilities can turn into carrying burdens that were never yours to carry in the first place. And loyalty can become staying long after you stop growing. I didn't understand that when I was 25. I didn't understand that when I was 35. Honestly, I don't think I really began to understand that until later in life. Because for most of my life, I believed that staying was always the honorable thing to do. It never occurred to me that sometimes the most honorable thing that you can do is to have the courage to honestly ask yourself whether you've become someone different than the person that first made that commitment. This isn't disloyalty, that's growth. And for a long time, I didn't know there was a difference. So before we go any further, let me leave you with this one question. What belief are you still carrying today simply because you've never stopped to question where it came from? Because that's the question that changed everything for me. And it didn't happen all at once. It happened one ordinary day when I walked into work. I still remember what it felt like when I started my career. I was proud, not because of the title, not because of the paycheck, because I finally felt like I was doing what I had always been taught to do: go to school, get a job, work hard, build a life. That's the blueprint. And honestly, for a long time, it worked. I graduated from college. I worked for the city of Houston. Eventually, I found my way into education. Every step felt like progress. Every opportunity felt like the confirmation that I was on the right path. I wasn't chasing status. I wasn't chasing money. I wasn't chasing stability. I wanted to build a life. I wanted to be able to provide for my family, and I wanted to create something that mattered. Looking back, I don't regret any of it, not for a second. Education has given me more than a career. It has given me purpose. It's given me relationships. It has given me the opportunity to teach and to coach. This has allowed me to encourage and teach young people during some of the most important years of their lives. A lot of those students are adults now. Some have their own families, some still call, some still stop by, some still send me messages just to let me know how they're doing. And to me, that's the real paycheck. Those relationships mean more than any title ever could. So let me be clear. This isn't a story about falling out of love with education. I still love education. I love teaching. I love coaching. I love watching a young person believe in themselves for the first time. What I struggle with now is that somewhere along the way, education became something different than the thing I fell in love with. And maybe that's true in more places than just education. Sometimes the missions stay the same, but the systems change. Sometimes the reasons you started isn't the reality you're living anymore. That was hard for me to admit because I was still showing up. The truth is, I still am. The first time I remember asking myself whether I was supposed to stay in education forever wasn't because I had a bad day at work. It wasn't because I was frustrated. It wasn't even because I stopped loving what I do. It happened when my youngest son started high school. That's it. Nothing dramatic, no big announcement, no life changing event, just an ordinary day that quietly marked the beginning of the end of the chapter. For the first time, both of my boys are in high school together. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I realized something. The season I'd been living for was beginning to change. For years, so many of my decisions had been made through one filter: what's best for my family, what's best for my kids, where do they need me to be? I don't regret that, not for a second. I'd make those same decisions all over again. But something has shifted. I caught myself wondering, what happens after this? Not after retirement or after this season. What does my life look like when my kids don't need me in the same way they do today? Who am I becoming then? Those questions stayed with me. They didn't go away. They got louder. At first, they showed up every now and then. Then they started showing up on the drive home, while I was walking on the track, while I was sitting in the stands watching their games. I couldn't stop thinking about life after education, not because I wanted to stop teaching, because I realized that teaching wasn't limited to the classroom. Maybe I could coach people one on one. Maybe I could start a business. Maybe I could write the book I've been carrying around in my head. Just maybe I could start this podcast. Maybe there was another way to do work I love without doing it the way I always had done it. About a year ago, those ideas stopped being daydreams. I started putting them in motion, quietly reading, learning, planning, writing, not because I knew exactly where it would lead, but because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't preparing for someone else's future. I was finally preparing for my own. I'm still doing good work. I'm still being the person people can count on. I'm still trying to make a difference every single day. From the outside, nothing looked wrong, but inside, something had changed. Nobody else could really see because I was still doing exactly what everyone expected me to do. And for a while, I convinced myself that was enough. But then that's the part nobody could see. And honestly, but here's the part nobody could see. And honestly, it's the part I'm still leaving. It's But here's the part nobody could see. And honestly, it's the part I'm still living today. A lot of people assume that because I'm talking about building something new, I've already left. I haven't. Every morning, I still get up and I go to work. I still coach. I still teach. I still pour my all into my students. I still try to make a difference. And I still love doing those things. That's important to me because I never want the conversation to sound like I've fallen out of love with education. I haven't. I've fallen out of love with the idea that education is the only place where I can live out my purpose. There's a difference. The teacher in me hasn't changed. The classroom is what's changing. So while I'm showing up every day for the people who depend on me, I'm also showing up for the person I'm becoming. I'm writing, I'm recording, I'm learning, I'm planning, I'm having conversations like this one. I'm building something that doesn't fully exist yet. For a long time, I felt guilty about it, almost like dreaming about tomorrow somehow meant I wasn't grateful for today. Now I see it differently. Preparing for the next chapter doesn't dishonor this one, it honors it because everything I'm building now was born from everything this season has taught me. Maybe that's why this season has felt so strange. It's like living in two worlds at the same time. One part of me is fully committed to where I am, the other part is quietly preparing for where I'm going. For a while, I thought those two things could not exist together. Now I think they have to, because bridges aren't meant to be permanent places to live. They're meant to help us get from one chapter to the next. Have you ever done that? Have you ever stayed somewhere because leaving felt like you were letting people down? Not because you stopped caring, but because you cared so much that you couldn't imagine walking away. I struggle with that, and I've been there. And here's what I've learned: you can be deeply grateful and still know it's time for something new. Those aren't opposing ideas. You can honor a season of your life without believing you're supposed to stay there forever. That realization didn't happen overnight. It happened quietly. It was a thought that kept coming back over and over and over again. It would come up as a question during the drive home. And it was a feeling that I couldn't quite explain. You know how a thought just keeps showing up? You push it aside, then it comes back a week later, then a month later. And before you know it, you realize it isn't just a thought anymore. It's trying to tell you something. For me, it was this: the person who accepted that first job isn't the same person that's sitting here talking to you today. At 25, I wanted security. At 35, I wanted to be respected. At 51, I wanted the freedom. I want the freedom, not freedom from responsibility, freedom to build a life that felt aligned with the person that I've become. My career has continued to grow, but so have I. The difference is we aren't growing in the same direction. At first, I felt guilty for even thinking that. Maybe I just needed to be more grateful. Maybe I was expecting too much. Maybe this is just what happens after you've been somewhere for so long. But the more I sat with those thoughts, the more I realized I wasn't trying to leave a life I built. I was finally giving myself permission to build the next one. Those are two very different things. I still believe in the work I'm doing. I still believe in showing up, and I still believe in making a difference. But I also believe that preparing for the next chapter doesn't dishonor this one. It honors it because everything I'm building tomorrow is only possible because of everything this season has given me. And once I understood that, the guilt started to disappear. It was replaced by something I hadn't felt in a long time: excitement. Not because I know exactly where this road leads. I don't. Because for the first time in years, I'm intentionally walking towards something instead of simply maintaining what I've already built. One of the things that I've learned over the last few years is that life has a way of testing your beliefs. Sometimes those lessons don't come from books, they don't come from mentors. Sometimes they come from the people closest to you. My recent lesson came from my own child. For the last several years, my wife and I had been encouraging our kids to think differently than we were taught to think. We wanted them to know they weren't limited by the blueprint we inherited. If they wanted to build something of their own, we supported them. If they wanted to chase a dream that looked different than ours, we supported them. If they wanted to create a life on their own terms, we supported them. At least that's what I believe. The interesting thing was, my oldest son never really pushed back. Whenever we talked about the future, he would just nod, he'd agree, he'd say all the things I expected him to say. So, somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, I had quietly written the ending to his story. Not because I wanted to control him, because I thought I knew where he was headed. Then one conversation changed everything. He looked at me and told me that he wanted something different. Reflecting back, the gall of that young fellow was appalling. It wasn't completely different from what we had been encouraging him to do. It was simply different than what I had imagined. If I'm honest, my first reaction surprised me, not because I didn't believe in him and not because I didn't think he could do it, because I realized I'd become attached to an expectation I didn't even know I was carrying. That moment forced me to stop and ask myself a hard question. Do I really believe what I've been teaching my children, or do I believe it when it doesn't challenge me? That's a hard question. It's a hard question as a parent, it's a hard question as an individual. Because it's easy to encourage someone else to dream bigger. It's much harder when their dream doesn't look anything like the one you imagine. The more I sat with it, the more I realized something. I wasn't wrestling with his future. I wasn't wrestling with my own expectations. I wasn't wrestling with his future. I was wrestling with my own expectations. Those aren't the same thing. Somewhere in that realization, something unexpected happened. The freedom I had spent years trying to give my children was the freedom I had finally gave myself. If I could tell them to build a life that fit who they are becoming, why couldn't I do the same? The question didn't leave me. It still hasn't, because maybe that's what parenting really is. Maybe we spend the first half of our lives teaching our children, only to discover that they spend the second half teaching us. My son didn't convince me to change my life. He held up a mirror. He reminded me that I had been encouraging everyone around me to dream bigger, while quietly forgetting to give myself the same permission. Maybe that's what growth looks like: not abandoning who you've been, not rejecting the life you've built, but finally extending yourself the same grace, the same freedom, and the same encouragement you've been giving everyone else all along. When we started this conversation, I told you I wanted to challenge an idea. Not because I thought I had an answer, but because I wasn't sure I'd been asking the right question. After thinking about it, after looking back over my own life, here's what I know today. Not what I'll know in 5 years from now, not what I'll know 10 years from now. What I know today: loyalty isn't the enemy. It never was. Loyalty built my life. It taught me commitment. It taught me consistency. It taught me to keep showing up. It taught me to care about people. I wouldn't be the husband that I am. I wouldn't be the father that I am. I wouldn't be the coach or teacher that I am without it. But somewhere along the way, I confused loyalty with permanence. I started believing that if something had been good to me, I owed it forever. I don't believe that anymore. I believe we can honor a season without living there forever. I believe we can be grateful for the chapters that shaped us while still being excited about the chapters that haven't been written yet. And maybe that's where I am today. Not at the end of the journey, not even at the beginning, somewhere in the middle. Still teaching, still coaching, still showing up, still trying to make a difference every single day, but also writing, recording, dreaming, building, and preparing. Not because I'm running away from the life I've built, because I'm finally running towards the life that's been calling me. And maybe that's what trying to figure this out really means. Not having all the answers, having the courage, though, to keep asking better questions. So I'll leave you with the same thing I've been carrying around in my own head. What part of your life are you staying loyal to? Simply because you've never been given the permission to ask whether it still fits the person you're becoming. Don't answer it today. Just notice it. Notice what comes to your mind on your drive home from work. Notice what you think about when the house is quiet. Notice what keeps showing up. Because sometimes The questions that won't leave us are the ones that change us. And before we meet again, I want you to pay attention to something. The next time you hear yourself say, I could never do that, or people like me don't do things like that, or it's probably too late, don't argue with the thought. Just ask one question. Who told me that? Because next time I want to talk about the limits we've accepted without ever stopping to ask who handed them to us in the first place. Until then, thank you, not for listening, but for being willing to ask questions that most people spend a lifetime avoiding. I will never take your time for granted. I'll see you next week. And until then, keep asking better questions.